We are at a dawn of a second machine age. The first industrial revolution replaced muscle power with mechanical power. The second one is replacing human cognitive labor with artificial intelligence. The implications are profound. Entire industries will be transformed and new ones will emerge. While some jobs will disappear, others we can't yet imagine will take their place. The real question is not whether technology will change work, it will, but whether it will adapt quickly enough to shape it into a force for good. And that is from The Second Machine Age by Eric Brynjolfsson and Andrew McAfee. And I am with Danielle Wallace from Beyond the Sky to chat about the future of work and education. Welcome, Danielle.
Thank you. It's so much fun to be here.
And what are some of your initial thoughts about the future of work and all? Well, I guess first let's come back. What got you started thinking about the future of work before we even get into it, and the future of education as well and learning within our
Yeah.
industry?
So that quote really made me think as you're speaking, it's not if, it's when. And maybe that's a theme for what got me interested. I have a podcast, You in 2042, and it's about imagining what the world's like in 2042. And within that, I've been having the pleasure of speaking with futurists and such. It really got me thinking about, oh, okay, it's not if, it's when. And I couldn't even grasp the concepts they were speaking about because this was like 5 years ago. And there, yeah, it's already happened. Like, okay, so our world of work is already here. It's already happening. We're already on this trajectory. As I see it relates to education, there's a direct effect because of the changing workforce and this future work world. So I feel it's my imperative to help, like to truly help other people
It's really
to
helpful. Yeah.
navigate through all this in light of what I'm experiencing and in light of what I'm hearing.
So then, if you think about it, well, what's the big? So if the future of work is changing, and the future of education, learning, training, all of that is changing as well. Um, I guess which one's changing faster? Are we keeping up paces?
Oh, so no, the future of work is changing much faster. And within the world of education, there is still, we're being mirrored by what was, which is traditional methods of teaching. And that's also mirrored mirrored now this time in the higher education space, the education space. So within the work world, we don't need to do our jobs effectively. It's all about performance outcome. It's all about, being productive
Mm-hmm.
and having the skills to do so. To get there, it isn't necessarily training. It's never necessarily been training. This is not new.
You
It's
know, that
just about
remi-
getting performance.
right. That's one of our my favorite books. Training Ain't Performance from TD.
Yeah,
That's literally
right.
a title
Yeah.
of it. Training Ain't Performance. So
And it never was within this world of work. So it's changing. It always never was just, it never was about training anyhow. It's always about performance. But now
right.
with the rise of more technology enablement, it's allowing people to be able to do perform their work in a way that harnesses whatever skills they have or don't, like mitigates the skills they don't have. Um, so in contrast, the world of like talent development is still about teaching people skills, and people don't necessarily need to be taught skills. Like I don't need to teach my son to like reality as much as it pains me. Like my son doesn't really need to know how to write better. Like no, he doesn't need to code better. Like no, it'd be nice if he has that foundational critical skills, which I can get to, but he's 15.
Right.
Really, if he has coherent thoughts, he knows how to use a large language model. Like it's fine.
So he's already there. Let's
Like
unpack that.
that's sufficient, right? Despite the fact that our world of education is still about teaching and training. Um, and I'm part of that. I'm part of that world. So I do that
Right.
too. but that has never been the goal. The goal has always been performance. So how can we enable that in the quickest way possible? So it means a rethinking of what it means to train people.
Rethinking of training and a rethinking of education. So let's unpack that for a minute, if we could. I found that super interesting, what you said about your son doesn't need to learn how to write better, doesn't need to learn how to code better. Let's unpack that. So those are a couple of skills that just a few years ago were considered hugely important.
Yes. And there isn't a need to train people on skills they don't need, because the outcome is not to train them. And that sounds like, it sounds laughable, but I have these conversations, like even within my own team, a lot. Like we're not developing for the sake of us to feel good. I mean, that's a nice byproduct.
Right.
But it's actually normally to get some type of outcome. Right. If we want to educate for the sake of educating, feel good, that's great. That's awesome. But normally that's within different means, and that's not normally within the world of work, like the working world. So when I look at my son, he's 15. He's knows how to code. He's interested in STEM heavily, but like, yeah, don't take more courses on coding. Like he doesn't love programming. I'm like, it's fine. You got the foundations. Good.
Right.
You can use a large language model to figure out, troubleshoot what you need to do. Great. He's not a strong writer. He's got the critical thinking to read and analyze what he reads. And there's ways using large language models to help that. But in terms of forming the cohesive sentences, he puts in like no effort. Like, talk about a good use case for using a large language model.
Wow.
Like, why not just use that to help your writing, if that's what the outcome is that you need? If I get him to do a task, like, you have to, I need this analyzed. He instead takes a lazy way out, which is maybe our future workforce. And it's like, and I'm paying him for the output, not by the time. He's like, he uses a large language model to figure this out. And I'm like, oh, I never thought of that. Okay. So he does it in a way quicker time, and then he can just play video games.
What's the old saying? If you want to learn the simplest way to do something, find the laziest person on staff.
Exactly. And if you would fast forward that to our future of work, when the work world, not necessarily geared towards being lazy, but it is geared towards driving productivity.
Right.
Then it comes means of just driving productivity in each of the workers.
Well, you brought up a great point, because if we're training on skills that aren't important, that don't matter, then we're wasting. And no company wants to have that waste within the process. So what skills and things do you think are becoming the most important ones?
Yeah. So very much so is the critical thinking, which I somewhat alluded to. And it's interesting when you think about the future of work, about how this is parlayed, and maybe as I'm even unpacking my own experiences. So the critical thinking to discern when you're using any type of augmentation, like a large language model, ChatGPT, but it can be like really anything. But if I use the example of my son again, for writing an essay, if he were to analyze the themes in Macbeth using large language model, he can get an answer. It's probably okay, because a lot of people have already analyzed Macbeth. He, however, doesn't have the critical thinking skills to discern if the output he's getting is accurate, especially if he hasn't read the book.
Right.
And while anything could be, especially now, it can be well phrased, without those discernment skills to be able to critically think, to analyze, to check, like the critical thinking, then it's at a disservice. And many of us experience that as we're using large language models, especially if we're using it for content creation or getting content somewhat.
Yes.
We hopefully have been in the work world long enough to discern, like, that doesn't make sense. I can validate this. Like, we just have those skills of critical thinking to be able to poke holes, fact check, parlay that to the mental models we already know. But what's then worrisome, if you think about education at the lower levels, is if people don't have the critical thinking skills, which I'm fortunate to have from being a certain age. You just have had to do that being in the world of work. But if you don't have that, then that's hard. So the critical thinking skills is both a critical skill, but then it also strikes me as a skill that's actually hard to acquire. And I was already hearing the lack of critical thinking as well prior to the changes of technology.
Yeah, because that's been an issue for quite a while. Actually, pre-generative AI, in terms of when we could all get it, that critical thinking was incredibly important and incredibly underutilized.
Yeah.
If you were, not enough people had it.
Yeah, so I see it as a very important skill, and it's one that worries me as I look into the future, because it's difficult. That one's I see as a gap, that I see as a gap. There's other skills such as empathy that are critical. These are very human skills. These are human skills. And that ability to be able to relate with others, hopefully through, we're doing right now through a live conversation.
Right.
And like both of us have had experiences in our life interacting with people one-on-one, which like in a live situation with humans to humans, which we can bring forth into other interactions. And we have a developed ability to pick up body cues, read between the lines, read between intonation and tone from our lived experiences. That idea of bringing forth all of that into this need for empathy becomes very important. And it's also an interesting one to think about. I'm less concerned about our future workforce not being able to develop empathy. I think that can be learned. I think there's things we can do there. But I'm very much aware that these human skills of communication, connection, being able to understand other people, like that empathy part, comes into play as these critical future skills.
Right. I like to say our number one job, whether it's business, instructional design, whatever, is to build authentic relationships. Yeah. So I completely understand what you mean about those human skills. They have to be there, and we can build them. We know how to.
We can build them. I think that's acquirable. And it's the human skills that are translating beyond culture, because there's differences in how people communicate. That's cool.
Right.
But it's like literally the human skills of being able to connect with another person, however that is, that becomes like imperative, and one that we take for granted right now, but without a focus on that could become a future gap.
Absolutely. So those human skills, and they've been important for a while too, much like critical thinking. Yeah. They just kind of receive more of a focus, I think, because their importance is even a bit greater than it was. But we know how to build those, create those. We could use, like, we use generative AI within our courses for people to practice soft skills, the human skills. And it does a really good job at it. But what are going to be the problems? I love this point, because I've had issues in the past within aerospace and people, the lack of critical thinking. How can we build that? How can we create more of it?
Yeah, so there's, like, I feel there needs to be an intentional focus on that. And it is somewhat, now I'm saying my own personal opinion, it's somewhat actually not using generative AI. And I say that with hesitation, because I'm actually, as you can see, like a fan of using
right
tools that can actually help drive productivity. But in contrast, there becomes an over-reliance on using these technology tools, which I'm a fan of, but not when it becomes at the detriment of developing critical thinking. So if I even look at being able to discern how to write an email back to somebody, and there's like tone laden in their email, and like it's could be a difficult conversation. It's me having, and they need this is today's this is my reality today, and it needs to be by a better solution, of course. With me thinking about it is I should just pick up the phone and meet. Like, again, that's my critical thinking and judgment parlayed with my past experience. Like, this might not go so well.
Right.
In this case, that option is not there. So rather than using generative AI to figure out how to respond to this in a way that's going to sound really nice and polite and everything like that, that doesn't allow me to learn. It doesn't force me to think. If I'm writing it myself, it's forced me to think through the consequences. If I write this, what's going to be the reply back? If I do this, what's going to happen? Like all those thinking and leading myself down my own mental models of, okay, if this, then that skill is actually what I need, which unfortunately I don't get if I'm to use a generative AI tool to, like a large language model, to craft my pretty well said reply.
So everything can come across clean, but we're not gaining the skills that we need to create that connection, create that bond, or grow our own skills. Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like we learn how to do those. What's the quote? We learn how to do the things we don't know how to do by doing them.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
we can't.
Exactly.
We can't just by default have the Chat GPT, Copilot, whatever.
And there is, I mean, there is ways also through training, through courses, especially through higher education, to try to foster their critical thinking skills. Like those become actually even more important, especially within higher education. That becomes more important. What I'm seeing in the industry though is there's less appetite to train people on things. You should just know how to think properly. Like, why am I training you to think? Like, I'm training, like, you should know how to think. Like, I know how to think. You know how to think. No. But it's a realization, if I'm at this level of my career, I've had all these real experiences to practice critical thinking constantly, and getting feedback and being wrong, and like all those experiences, these lived experiences. I didn't take a course of how to critically think. You do it, you fail, you learn, and you're learning the whole time. And I wasn't relying on a ChatGPT to formulate my, what do I do now? This is my problem. How do I solve it? Which I'm a huge fan of. I'm a huge fan of doing that. But I'm very aware of what skills I'm not practicing, or I'm not acquiring when I'm doing that.
Right. And we have to be intentional about our awareness of that today, because it's so easy to not utilize them. And then that's kind of super interesting to me, because if we don't become intentional about the skills that we want to increase, such as a simple response, how to build those relationships, how to create those bonds, then the authenticity is going to be gone. It's going to leave, right?
Yes, that's interesting. Yes, I'm starting to see that a bit. Just as, one person's Copilot message is replying back to the other person's Copilot message, and everything sounds lovely and sanitized, but I'm like, I don't know. Like, I wonder about the authenticity piece of that.
Yeah, me too. Because you can always, I don't know. There's an odor when somebody's not being authentic, right? There's a certain odor to it. People can sense it, smell it, whatever you want to say.
And even if they can't, we're talking about that connection. So again, some of the things I talk about meeting is you're missing that human connection, because you yourself are putting thought into how to reply back. Like, it's just the intentionality of the connection as well, even regardless of if anybody notices. So it comes back to your point about being intentional about the skills we're cultivating, being okay with which ones we're foregoing. Like, okay, I'm not going to work on my critical thinking anymore, which sounds awful. Sounds awful. But I guess maybe better off is like being aware that I'm making a trade-off, right?
Great point. Yeah. So if you have to know it's a choice that you're making, and then if you're making that choice, then here's the results of whatever that is for your choice. That is super interesting. So as we go forward, and as we move forward in the world of work, in the world of education, the human side. So since things are changing, right? I mean, you started with the big comment that the writing skills for your son are not that important, but the communication piece is, the coding piece is not that important for him any longer, but he needs the base understanding of what that is. And then we kind of brought that into the work world, where sometimes we could have that, AI, that GPT talking to this GPT instead of people talking to people. And a lot of times it's our quirks, for lack of a better word, that help us create that connection, because we understand who people are. And then we have to cultivate an environment where not everything has to be sanitized, where making mistakes is okay. Right? Would you agree with that, or
That.
what are
Yeah,
your
I would
thoughts?
agree with that. I see that as increasingly difficult as the pace increases within the work world, and there is more tools to help reduce those risks. But there's so much from a development standpoint that we're learning from being able to have a safe place to make mistakes. And the industry talks about, tritely safe space, but no, as what we're talking about is it's like actually like I need to acquire these skills. So thinking skills, doing, learning, course correcting become more important than in the past.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, those making those course corrections where you can say, "Oh, I did this, it didn't work." So what I like to say is, where from if you're in a leadership position or whatever position you're in, you make much smaller decisions. You make more smaller iterative decisions so you can adjust, because that pace you talked about is incredible. It's fast, right? So we can't make that one long range decision and everything else unfolds from that. We have to make those smaller decisions and adjust to make sure we get to that end, wherever that is, for the organization and all the changes that are happening that we don't even know about yet.
Right. Right.
That's super interesting. So what's the biggest thing you speak at a lot of conferences? You're an authority in this. What are some of the biggest questions that you get about either learning or the world of work, the 2042 world? What are some of the biggest things you get?
Yeah. So people are actually, what I find is people are trying to grapple with right now. So the 2025,
Oh,
given the complexities of the world of work, complexities of the world, I find people cannot go think forward to 2028. Like that's too far jump, which is rightly
okay.
so, because that is hard to for real imagine that far ahead. What I find interesting is most people's sentiments is like, I'm trying to get caught up to 2022, um, which is okay. And as I tell
Right.
everybody within as it relates to like chat gpt as an example, it's like it's okay, you're not behind, it's okay, like everybody's behind, it's okay. So it's relieving the anxiety about seeing all the headlines, is about seeing what they think is happening. Like I've been behind the scenes to see what is actually happening. I'm like, okay, no, you're really, don't worry, you're not behind, things are not as necessarily what's being told out there in the headlines. So that's probably my biggest sense that I get to people is like, it's okay, you're not behind. Yes, keep play testing, keep trying, keep learning, but like but then there's enough happening right now. It's like you can take some of this burden off about trying to fully automate and digitize and use various types of AI with your workforce. It's like it's okay. Well, the path isn't imminent. While this change is going to happen, it's not if but when, we have a bit more
Right.
control over it than it feels, because it feels like we don't have enough control. It's actually, it's okay. We do.
Oh, so you think there is a little more, we have that individual control within our organization a little bit more than it feels like at times, because it does feel like
Yeah,
we're
it
being
feels.
pushed.
Yeah, it feels very push. Feels like there's a lot of. It's because within the context of uncertainty, and so my message out is like everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's uncertain. Nobody's pushing ahead. It's okay. It's okay.
We just need to row at the same time to get there.
Exactly. It's
Well,
okay.
like our university president, Dr. Reynolds, he says it's not about generative AI, agentic AI. It's not about the tools. It's about organizational transformation. So
Yeah,
that human part is still the center of where it
absolutely.
is, and all these other things can make it happen, make it help us do the work better, faster, better,
Yeah.
and all of that. But at the core, it's organizational transformation, not
Oh,
technology.
absolutely. Absolutely. And which is why this is such a long process, as many organizations are still going through their own digital transformation, which is great. It's good. So this becomes another piece of that rolling evolution. And it's one that we can all be part of this ride. And with that, be aware of what we as individuals can do, but the trade-offs they're making as we're learning new skills, choosing where we're choosing to invest our time, where we're choosing to learn skills, where we're not. And that can help us drive forward to a future work world that is meeting everybody's needs.
So if you're not making those change, if you're not making those changes, and you're choosing to outsource everything to a GPT, then you're not gaining the skills you need. So is that what I'm hearing? Don't
Yeah,
outsource
but
everything.
no,
Get
but
in the
but, but
game.
but it's the intentionality of that. It's like it's okay. Like again, everything's okay. Nobody's behind. If you're choosing to trade off your writing skills, that's fine. Like fine. Like especially if you've already developed writing skills. That's as an example, right? Like it's fine. I don't need to work on my writing skills further. That's fine.
Right.
I'm not 15. Um, but it's being intentional about those trade-offs. And maybe if I'm 50, maybe I choose. Well, I don't know if I'm 50. Maybe if I'm 21, then maybe I'm choosing what skills I'm choosing to invest in, and where I'm okay to make trade-offs.
Right.
And
So
realize that there's some of these there's base skills of empathy and critical thinking that I'm speaking to that need to be acquired somehow.
that's a great point. So it's when what trade-offs do you want to make? What trade-offs are going to help you the most? Where do you want to grow? And that's been a question that's been around forever, right? So that's not anything new with what we have going on with the, the the generative AI or anything else. So those are still those basic human questions we're still trying to answer.
Yeah. This is
Man.
in the end, it all comes down to performance.
So if then what I guess then what have you been training yourself on, or kind of being intentional about getting better at? Do you
So
have anything?
yeah, so for me, it's the intentionality. It's not writing skills, as I alluded to, but it's the intentionality of being able to read between the lines of human experiences, and being able to pick up on body language and cues on things not said,
Oh,
because that's like a very human skill. I think that's important. Things not said, but having the intentionality of being able to do that and realize, okay, how should I best respond? Is it a phone call? Is it an email? Is it nothing? So that deliberate practice, which then I'm not going to outsource that to. I could outsource that to generative AI, but I don't want to outsource that to, I want to acquire those skills.
that's super interesting as well, because if we outsource that, then and you miss that, you would need that skill. And if you don't have it, then you're not going to build those authentic relationships with folks. So things aren't going to be, it's just a great big snowball that's going to happen.
Exactly. That's something that's important to me. Yeah,
Wow. So you're with Beyond the Sky, correct?
that's right.
That's your company.
That is.
Can you tell us a little bit about that and how people can get into contact with you if they want to? Because you have
Yes.
some amazing thoughts on all of this.
So my team and I create custom learning experiences. So often that's like e-learning or virtual class or videos. We also have AI-enabled role plays that allow people to practice conversations, practice some of these human skills within a safe space while getting feedback from generative AI. And then I speak at all the major conferences, and I'm very passionate about elevating learning and development. So I can be found at beyondthesky.ca.
Beyondthesky.ca. And you do have a passion for learning and development, and just keeping that, using all these tools to support people and support organizations where it really matters. It's very cool.
Yeah, and I do welcome anybody to be a free community of practice. So again, just really trying to help build the community, help us all collectively build the skills that we need. So I do also offer that. So it's free.
Well, Danielle, thank you. Thank you for your time today. And if anybody wants to reach out, please do, beyondthesky.ca. And let's have an amazing week and be intentional about everything that we're doing out there to grow better and personally.
Amazing. Thank you so much for this opportunity.